My name is Ann Dolan, and for the last 27 years, my team and I have been helping kids to do better in school and ultimately to get into the college of their choice. And part of that journey includes a testing strategy. I want to welcome you to day 4. It's just been a fabulous week. And if you're a little bit confused about the SAT, ACT, test optional, what all this stuff means, you're not alone and you are in the right place. In today's session, we're going to cover how to decide if your child should submit scores, what test optional really means, and how to build a smart, effective study plan. So let's dive in. And my first expert I have today is Renee Minnich. Renee, welcome back.
Thanks, Ann. Well, happy to be back again today.
Just a bit about Renee. She's a college consultant here with me at Educational Connections. And prior to coming to the company, she was the former senior associate director of admission at Rochester Institute of Technology. Altogether, at a couple of different other schools, she's been in admissions for 28 years, reviewing applications. And she's reviewed over 20,000 of them from kids of all stages of their journey, in-state, out-of-state, transfer students, international students, you name it, Renee has done it. And my other expert in the house is Pete Pecoraro. Pete, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me in at such a critical juncture in time, too.
It really is, Pete. I agree. A bit about Pete. He's a test prep tutor here with me at Educational Connections. And he's also a professional development specialist, which means that he knows these tests so well inside and outside that when new tutors come on board, he helps to train them as well. He's a former high school teacher, and for 11 years, he's been helping kids maximize their scores on both the SAT and ACT. So Renee, I'd love to start with you. And I'm wondering if you could walk parents through the role that test scores play in admissions today. And then Pete, I'm going to go to you in a few slides and we're going to dive into the actual tests. So Renee, what's going on with test scores?
Right now, Ann, the role of test scores is just an ever-changing topic, and I can understand why some families are feeling confused and not sure which direction to go on things. Things change from last year to this year, so you really do need to kind of, keep up on what's happening and have the most current information. To get started, I think the right place to start is talking about what test optional, what test blind, what test required means when you're looking at colleges, because colleges will put that information out. So if test scores are required, you have to submit test scores as part of your application and they will be considered. If a school is test optional, you can choose to submit test scores, but you don't have to. And if a school is test blind, they will not look at your test scores, even if you do submit them. So those are the 3 categories that school fall under. But things have changed quite a bit in the past few years, and many colleges that changed the test optional or test blind during COVID are now coming back to test score required or test score considered. So there is a lot of movement here, and you really need to make sure that you're checking each college for what they are in this most current year. Colleges. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. And Renee, are we going to get in, maybe not right now, but a little while, can we talk a little bit about whether test optional schools are really test optional?
Yes. Yeah. We
Okay,
have
good.
that. We have that a little bit farther down. So, colleges are now deciding whether to continue the same practices that they've had in the past for a couple of reasons. Standardized tests have been found to be a pretty good indicator of how well a student will perform in college. And they're also a way to differentiate students who have similar academic backgrounds when they're looking at a competitive admissions landscape. So you just want to make sure that you're keeping up on the current info. So how scores still impact and what do they impact? I think that's kind of an important thing to look at next. Not only can a high test score boost your chances of admission, but it can also help you receive a higher merit scholarship or honors consideration. So sometimes you want to think about that, about whether you're as well. So here's the question. Do I submit my test scores or do I not submit my test scores? I answer that question, I think, every day when I'm working with seniors. So the answer is not a blanket yes or no across the board for every student. You really have to make that decision for every individual college that you're applying to. So what I do is pull some data. I want to look at each school. I want to look at their average SAT or ACT scores that they have. I want to look where the students' scores fall within those ranges. And I also want to look at how many of the students in the past that applied to that school submitted test scores. So there's a lot of different factors that we're looking at here and making those decisions. My rule of thumb is if a student's scores fall in the upper half of the middle 50% of those who have been admitted, you submit the scores, unless the transcript is truly a better indication of their academic potential. So you can't really even just look and say, here's my scores and here's the averages, should I submit them? You want to compare your scores against your transcript, because you want to submit your scores if they're adding something to your application. You don't want to submit them if they're detracting from an application. And then as you look at schools that are test optional, if you don't submit them, you sort of run the risk that they're going to assume they're bad, and that they're much lower than their profile. Not every school will do this, but it is something that you want to think about and be thoughtful about. So I usually, to be honest, kind of just set aside one meeting when I'm working with students. We go down through every one of their schools and we make an individual decision for each school about whether we should be submitting to that particular school.
That makes sense, Renee. That's super helpful. Thank you, because I know that's often in parents' minds and kids' minds too. All right, so let's go back to that question of when is it really optional? Because I think this is probably the most confusing part of everything.
I agree. I agree. And I mean, when a school says test optional, most families will just look and say, oh, test optional. I can send them if I want to or not send them. But looking at that individual layer of how many of their enrolled first year students the previous year submitted test scores is a really good indication of how heavily that school values test scores. So if you're seeing a school where, 20 to 30% of their incoming class submitted test scores, that school is truly test optional. They have admitted many students who did not submit scores, and those students are enrolling. If you're seeing numbers like 80%, 85% of their enrolled freshman class or first year class submitted test scores, that school is really test score preferred. So that's kind of one of the ways that I will, look at schools. In addition to that, like we have a chart here that kind of will show you the schools that we know. As college counselors, we work with a lot of schools. So we kind of know just year to year what schools are really test score preferred, and we'll kind of share that information with the students. So most Ivy League schools, competitive schools, test scores required. Then we have this test optional category in the middle, and this is where the questions really fall. Test score preferred schools, you can see a list of schools here. These are some common schools that our students apply to, where they say they're test optional, but they really are test score preferred. And then truly test optional. And then, of course, test blind schools that do not consider testing. So I have a student right now that has, and this is a lot of my students will have Virginia Tech and James Madison on their list. If depending on where their scores fall within James Madison's middle 50%, I would be very comfortable not submitting them. But Virginia Tech, I'm hard pressed not to submit them because I know they really do want to see them. And I don't want an assumption made that they're very low because we chose not to submit them.
Thank you for that, Renee. A parent asked about New York schools, maybe the SUNY system. Um, any thoughts on that?
So, we really could kind of approach this, I think, for every state across the board. I'm from the New York area, so I know that well. But even within a state, you're going to see all different answers. So it really is important to look at each school individually and pull up the data on that school and then make that determination.
Makes sense, Renee. Thank you for that. All right, Pete, let's talk about the nitty-gritty and the tests. Let me bring you in to discuss the differences between the SAT and the ACT.
Yeah, they are very different tests. They have some commonalities, but some things that come to mind that are kind of important differences. The SAT, the reading questions, the paragraph questions are shorter. They come in the form of one or two paragraphs at the most. On the ACT, it is a full essay, 85 to 90 lines, a full article as far as reading is concerned. On the SAT, it is a fully digital test. So you'll take the test that way with a built-in calculator for the math. On the ACT, there's still a paper test option and a digital test option that's growing, but you still have the paper test option on the ACT. Many students feel like the SAT is a harder test, like more academically challenged, but to counter that, you do get more time. There's more time for any given question on the SAT versus the ACT. Sometimes folks feel like my students feel like the ACT is more student friendly, but you have to keep moving. You have to keep moving. So in some ways, it's the faster test. So those are some of the differences. The SAT may feel harder, but a student might think, well, if you give me time, if I have that more time to deal with it, then that's okay. And the paragraphs are shorter anyway. So these are some of the kind of like the key differences that come, that you would notice.
Pete, I know that there are lots of changes with the ACT. Tell us what's going on with this particular test.
Yeah, we are in the midst of change. I mean, in the past 2 years, between the two tests, the changes have been, mind-boggling for a landscape that was kind of quiet for a decade or two. This time, it's the ACT's turn to change, and what they've done is they've heard some kind of like the feedback that it's a fast-moving test. So now there's fewer questions overall and more time per question across the board. So that's an important change. And perhaps the biggest change is the science, which was required, mandatory, is now optional. So you don't have to take the science. You could elect to if you want to, but it's become optional, and it will be recorded as a separate data score, a separate data point that does not figure into the composite. The composite will be built from English, math, and reading. Prior to, it was built from the four subjects: English, math, reading, and science. So that's a big change on the test, and then the time, more time per question, fewer questions overall.
We've often talked before, Pete, about the science actually being really not science. It's more like reading comprehension and it's fairly coachable. So do you think that kids should still, knowing that you can improve your score pretty significantly in that area, they should still stick with that science section?
Well, there are a couple different ways of looking at that, because even if that's kind of like your thing and you can get good at it by learning how to interpret charts, graphs, and tables, we still have to consider the idea that it's not going to be part of your composite score. So, but as a separate score, as kind of a does it help my application stand out? That very well could be something that you want to take heavily into consideration, especially if you're pursuing a science discipline. I graduated from the University of Illinois, big time for engineering. Many students consider that a top school for engineering. So you're going to think, I probably should have that. They probably want to see that. So there are a few ways of looking at this, depending on what your kind of like your aspirations are, what you think you might major in when you get to college.
Awesome. I'm just curious, do you think the ACT is like a slightly more coachable test, or do you think the SAT is, or do you have an idea
You
behind
know,
that?
I've long felt that the ACT is a slightly more teachable test, because of the reading comprehension aspect and the vocabulary aspect on the SAT. I feel like those are like more about habit formation that you've done for years, is harder to move the needle on those.
Mhm.
Where on the ACT, I feel like there's a couple of areas that are distinctly coachable. Now, I'm not. That's not to say that that's your test, but because there's pros and cons to either of these tests. But if somebody asked me that question straight up, like you just did, I'd say I feel like the ACT is perhaps a little bit more of a teachable, coachable test.
Thanks for that, Pete. All right, let's talk a little bit about a student strategy. These are probably the three most common questions we hear from parents. And let's start out with the first one. Should I take the SAT, the ACT, or both tests?
Great question. I will say this. First off, whatever test you take, I think the folks out there need to know that these both tests are accepted. Neither is preferred, and they're globally accepted. No matter what schools you're applying to, they're treated equally. They're looked at equally. So that's important to know. Then past that, since we're in the midst of change right now with the ACT, I do feel like a good place to start for a student is with the SAT. Many students have probably taken the PSAT 10. It's a pretty dominant part of high school now. So you could look at the PSAT and say, how did you feel about that? Did that go pretty well? Does it line up with kind of like the score that you think you could get to, that your college is interested in as kind of a benchmark? Could you work with that? If so, then then the SAT could be a good test for you, and you can even go a step further on their Blue Book app, take a practice test of the SAT, and then really kind of solidify that decision. So I'd say start with the SAT. If you did all of that and you said, wow, that was really, I did not feel good about that. The math was crazy hard. Everything was hard. Then the ACT, you could give consideration to it, and then start asking, like, would this be a good fit for me? And we'd be happy to help you kind of like navigate that decision.
Makes sense. Given the time that we're in right now, maybe in a year we might have a different opinion, but that makes sense to go with what we know with the SAT. All right, next question. How many times should a student take the test?
It's an individual decision, but I will say the dominant trend nowadays, and I think this is the right way to go, is think about think ahead of planning on taking the test 2 or 3 times. The first time is frequently a benchmark for students. It's like to get used to the test. There's the nerves. It's new, and you get a score, and that kind of maybe takes your temperature or your baseline. The second or third time out, then there's the mystery has been stripped away. You feel like you can do better, you know better. It's not as kind of nerve wracking the second or third time around. So, and then you'll have had more school by that point too. So, as kind of like you cover subjects in school, so your knowledge base grows. I think it is wise to plan on taking it 2 or 3 times.
I know the other day, I think it was Renee or Kristen said they had a student taking it for the fifth time, and they had a conversation about that.
Right. I
Yeah,
think that,
I had a
Pete, the conversation I had with the student was that he has done test prep on his own the entire time, and he expected his scores to improve. And I said, after that many times, I think you need to change up your prep a little bit, like maybe work one-on-one with a tutor, approach things in a different way, so that maybe if you are going to continue taking it past 3 times, that you are doing everything you can to try to lift that score as opposed to doing the same thing over and over. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, totally. It totally makes sense that you have to mix up your strategy. I think another, which kind of, I want to say this, which kind of fits into your point, is that first time you take it, that's when you can discover where the gaps are, where the deficits are. You'll get information, you'll get reports from the tests, and discover it's like, okay, when I take it the next time, here's what I need to zero in on. It's the grammar that held me back. It's the math that held me back. So you can really get more strategic and zero in on it, so that when you do it, I feel like you have to do it. You have to do it intelligently. If you're taking it I had a student take the ACT 7 times. And it's like, are you doing something different each of those times, or is it or is it kind of trying to do the same thing the same way?
Mm-hmm.
You have to apply a strategy and intelligence to it.
Pete, it makes me think of the strategy of taking a test, seeing your weak points, prepping in those areas, taking it again, looking at your score at those weak areas and prepping some more. And I know that's the approach you take because, there's lots of data that suggests working on weak areas helps to elevate your score more than focusing just everything equally across the board, or also incorporating the things that you're already good at just as much. What do you think?
Absolutely, absolutely. That's the way I approach tutoring, especially the second time around. Some students want to kind of like, and families want to kind of like, well, let's keep going, and they taking a test, and it's like I get kind of like that energy, but I think a wise way is like, let's wait for the scores to come back, because you're going to get a lot of information that could
Mm-hmm.
make like the second round of tutoring that much more meaningful, that much more effective, by like as you just said, and by kind of like, let's find out where those subcategories are, where lift can be found, is absolutely fundamental to what we do, and for me, the way I, I go about it.
All right, next question. How does super scoring work?
Okay, the idea of super scoring is that you can take your very best subject scores and blend them into your composite score. So to take an example, maybe your first ACT, you got a 25 on your math, and the second time you get a 30 on your math. The 30, the higher subject score, becomes part of your composite score that you could submit to a college. And all of the subjects can be handled this way. Even for that student we were just talking about, we took it like multiple times. We would be blending, the super score would be blending the highest English, the highest math. And same for the SAT as well, the highest reading and writing and your highest math into the super score, which is the highest of all scores.
That's super helpful, Pete. And I think sometimes kids look at their score and like, oh my gosh, look at my score. It's so amazing. And then they forget to realize, yes, but everybody else was super scored too, right?
Yeah, there's a democratization across the board with super scoring is because everybody gets to do it. But I do think it is a great thing for students. You might have had a bad day out on math. You just the mix of questions, your own personal energy that day, and it didn't go well. Then another day, it's like you feel like you're immortal. You go in and you get a tremendous math score. You can use that to very good advantage. That's what super scoring is all about.
I love super scoring too. Okay, let's keep going and talk about really a timeline for this. And I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about when kids should start prepping and what that looks like for them.
Yeah, great question. And this is kind of a fundamental kind of aspect of your calendar, kind of getting your calendar organized. But I would say the rule of thumb is to figure out like when your test date might be. What are you targeting as far as a test date, and then start your preparation 2 to 5 months ahead of that. I think as a practical matter, if we're looking kind of like in like I'm a sophomore, I'm a junior, looking at it in that way, a great time to start is the after your sophomore year is finished, that summer before your junior year starts in the autumn is a great place to start. Many students will take their tests in the fall of their junior year. That's the that's the dominant trend, and that's when you're going to have the readiness based on schoolwork and such. So a great opportunity is to start the summer before your junior year begins. Is a excellent time when students are less scheduled, and you can really dig into test prep at that time. So that's kind of like the broad timing of things for seniors. I mean, it's not there's still opportunity for you. There's as far as application dates, you can still start your prep in the early fall as well, and get the help you need.
Yeah, that's true. You know, sometimes seniors think, oh my gosh, it's too late for me. And it's not, because you can still take a fall test and still apply early decision or early action. You'll still get your score back in time.
Mhm.
So that's a good option
Absolutely.
too. Thank you for that, Pete. All right, so let's move ahead and talk a little bit about really what parents can expect in terms of results, in terms of what prep looks like. I know you've taught group classes, you've also done one-to-one. What do you think is a good approach for kids?
I'm convinced after kind of tutoring as long as I've had hundreds of students over these 11 years, is that the very best way to go about test prep tutoring is the one-on-one approach. I've had situations where I've done 2-on-1 or 3-on-1 or even classroom, and I just think like in order to kind of like get that student what he or she needs and focus on his or her weaknesses and strengths and priorities, one-on-one is the best way to go. I think it also kind of holds the student responsible too. There's a discipline that's kind of applied there when we're meeting and you're I'm asking you about your homework and and how it went and what you missed and what we need to focus on your priorities. Um, One-on-one is the very best way to go. In conjunction with that, I am assigning homework. That's part of what we do, and it's important to use the official test documents wherever and whenever possible. That's absolutely fundamental to what we do, and we're providing. And part of educational connections approach, the one-on-one approach, is session notes and feedback. after after every session. So as part of the ongoing dialogue about how things are going. So all of this is part of. I feel like you're going to not have that if it's in when you have 3-on-1, 2-on-1, or classroom situations. So
Pete,
that's
do
how
you
we
have
get the
room for
lift.
you have room for any more kids this
I
fall?
do. I do. I could take a few more students, 3 or 4 more students. So
Okay,
I'm
awesome.
available.
Okay, that's great. Thank you for that. All right, so I'd love to bring in Ann Stewart Kirkhorn. Ann Stewart and I have worked together for a long time. She talks to parents that are interested in learning more about test prep. And Ann Stewart, hello.
Hi, nice to see you all. This is a great discussion.
It's great to have you here. Tell us a little bit about what parents are thinking this time of year for their kids, what they talk to you about, what you talk to them about.
Yeah, so a lot of the parents that are calling in now for test prep um, are asking a lot of the questions that Pete, you're covering today. What's the difference between the two tests? How do I know which one's best for my student? And then when's the right time to start prepping for the test? Some of the things that we look at with the right time that they start prepping and how long they're going to need are things like what math are they in right now, and have they gotten through algebra 2, or if they're a junior and they're in algebra 2, can they get some of that under their belt before they dive into the test prep. We look at kind of extracurricular schedule. If there's a time of year too that, if your child plays a spring sport or is in a spring musical, fall, if you can get that out of the way before the demands on your child's time are, really at their height, that's helpful for students. And then, like you said, summer is always great for students too, because they don't have those same school demands. And then kind of in the larger picture of things, I usually try, I'm sure the other program managers too, what colleges are they considering? Have they even started thinking about where they want to go? And if that's the case, are there certain scores they need to hit to be a competitive candidate for that school? So if they're not working with a college counselor, it could be a good time to connect them with someone like Renee or one of our college counselors, so that they can start to build that balanced list in conjunction with the test prep. And then, and just one other thing I want to say, the biggest thing parents ask, how do we match you with a coach? And we take that so seriously here at Educational Connections, because we know it's really important that our students have that rapport with their counselor, their test prep coach, one of their tutors if they're doing executive functioning or a subject with us. But if they have ADHD or another learning difference that we need to be aware of, and who's going to be a best match to help them with accommodations they might have. We have a lot of students that come in with test taking anxiety or just generalized anxiety, and we want to match them with a coach they feel comfortable with, that they trust, and is going to build their confidence up, so that when it gets time to take the test on test day, they can take a breath and go into it and feel like they're, doing their best at it. So that's what I'm hearing.
Awesome. Thanks, Ann Stewart. And how can people get in touch with you if they want to talk about it?
Yeah, so you can scan the QR code there, or my email is ann-stewart@ectutoring.com. So feel free to email me directly.
Awesome. Thank you, Ann Stewart.
Sure,
It's
thanks.
great to see
Good to
you.
see you too.
Fabulous. All right. So I see we have a bunch of questions. Melissa, I would love to bring you in so you can share some of the questions that parents are asking.
All right. Hi, everyone. Yes, tons of questions coming in. And the first one's about super scoring. So a parent wants to know, when you super score, is the school also seeing the lower score that was not factored in?
I can tackle that. So when you submit scores, if you send them officially from the College Board, you don't have the option of only doing one part of the score. You have to submit your entire test score date from that particular date. And when you're self-reporting, you'll need to do that as well. But know that when the colleges receive them, they import them into their system. And when your application comes up for review, because it's all done electronically now, if that school super scores, they will only pull those 2 highest scores. So the person who's reading your application won't see the full set of scores. They will only see the 2 highest sets.
Great. Thank you. All right. And another question. This one is also for you, Renee, since you used to work in admissions at a STEM school. Which is better in the eyes of a admissions officer at a STEM school, the SAT or the ACT, or does it matter?
That's a great question. I will say it doesn't matter. Schools really don't prefer one set of test scores over another set. You might think because the ACT has the science component, and I like the way we spoke a little bit about it earlier, because there are some schools that are coming out and saying we're either going to require the science portion or we strongly recommend it for students who are going into certain majors or at STEM schools. But there is not a preference one over the other. And if you submit an SAT and not an ACT, they're just going to be looking at your science grades in your classes. So they still have that information. So I wouldn't say that one is better or another. Sometimes there's certain parts of the country that really only lean towards SATs or ACTs. So, and other parts, students will take them both. So you're not going to hold that against a student.
Thank you. And the next question is for Pete. Pete, how much time do you generally recommend for students who are prepping for the SAT?
Oh, that's such a great question. I mean, now they're individual learners. I mean, so this is a rule of thumb. But I'd say it's a good rule of thumb that I've used is 8 hours on math and 8 hours on reading and writing. So that's 16 hours. Having said that, I mean, there are students who need more of those things or less of those things. So, but if it's kind of like John Q student, and I don't know that, and just kind of like what's the dominant trend, I'd say I'd go with what I said there. Eight, eight on each of the four of the main subject areas.
Thank you. All right. And here's a question for Anne. Do you have test prep tutors available in California?
Yes, we absolutely do. We have test prep tutors that work with kids across the country, and we have a number of kids in California. So we would love to help your child there.
All right. And this one's a little off topic, but still it's regarding test scores. A parent wants to know, Renee, are AP test scores reported to schools as well? And is that considered part of a student's application?
That's a really good question, and that will vary by school. There are some colleges that will require you to submit every single AP score as part of the application process if they see that you have taken an AP course. And there are other colleges that will only look at the fact that you took the AP course and look at the grade, and you don't need to submit the scores until after you are admitted and are looking to get credit. So that would vary by college.
Great. And Renee, you can also take this one from Jay. Are scores weighted differently for students who have a 504 plan who score below average on the SAT or ACT?
That's a great question as well. Have touched a little bit on things like that this week, but we really haven't dived in deep on it. So I would say, typically when a student submits information that they have learning differences or an IEP or a 504 plan, that will, is a part of the application review, but they don't lower the standards for admission for a student who supplies that information. The goal is really to admit students who feel that they feel can be successful in the program, and then also make sure, and this is some of the family's responsibility as well, that school has the level of support that student might need.
All right. And the second question about students with 504 plans, if they have a 504 plan in school, does that mean that they also get that accommodation on their SAT or ACT?
They would need to apply for extended time or whatever type of support or modifications that they would need. It's not an automatic process. They actually need to submit some paperwork. You might know a little bit more about that, Pete, than I do.
Yeah, they definitely have to substantiate that. That's not an automatic. So the best place to kind of start is with the school guidance counselor, and they're very adept at applying for the accommodations, but they do have to be applied for, and they need backup and measurements and all of the supporting documents that go along with that decision to grant the accommodation for extra time or or being read, having a test reader. There's a variety of accommodations, time being the most common by far, but it's not an automatic, even with having the 504 for school.
All right, thank you. And Emily wants to know about the new enhanced ACT. So are schools trusting those scores since it is brand new? And do the colleges consider the enhanced ACT reading, English, and math scores truly equal to previous versions of the ACT for kids who are currently applying?
That is a great question. I mean, this has been rolled out for a long time, and the ACT they've gotten a lot of feedback before they even made these changes. So there's a it's fully accepted, that this is on par with all of the prior versions of ACT. It's a new test, but but the colleges have had a chance to weigh in on this. The ACT has had a chance to take their feedback into consideration. So the enhanced ACT is new, but it's been looked at by all of the players who have all of the stakeholders involved, and the uh, the dis- the general consensus is that this is in line with prior ACTs and can be trusted, kind of like what the questioner was getting at.
And Pete,
And I
this is
think,
kind of, oh, sorry, Renee.
I was just going to add to that. This is, although this is a big change for the ACT this year, there's been multiple revisions of the SAT over the years. So colleges they're used to this. This has happened in the past, and they do know for it to actually roll out that there has been testing and data, and they just go into the year saying these are valid scores and we're going to trust them, and continue on their normal process.
All right, and Pete, another question about that. So one parent wants to know, in your opinion, is the new enhanced ACT harder than the previous version?
I don't think it's harder. If I had to weigh in on that, I think you can make the very strong argument that it's somewhat easier or friendlier for a few reasons. Number one, fewer questions. Just to give one example, the English used to be 75 questions. It's going down to 50. That's 25 questions gone. So there's fewer questions to deal with, more time per question. So there's that. On the math, sections of word problems or story problems, real life problems on the old test, eliminated. Is not part of the new enhanced ACT. So if anything, I'd say it's equal in content, or perhaps I think you could make the very strong argument that it's going to be easier to deal with the new ACT. So I definitely, that's how I'd frame that up, and you definitely take a look at that test.
Great. And we have a few questions about super scoring, Pete. Can you super score the ACT? So like the 3 different parts.
With other ACTs, yes. With prior ACTs and upcoming ACTs, you can super score amongst those. A question's come up in the past, and maybe the questioner has kind of had this in his or her mind: is could you super score between ACT and SAT? And that is not a thing. But between all of the various kind of like components of the ACT, when you take it in September, October, November, et cetera, then yeah, you can super score all of those, as many as there are. There could be three or four of each of those subject scores. They could all be blended.
Great. And then a second part from that same parent, a different question. If you use accommodations for the SAT or ACT, is the college aware that the student took the test with accommodations?
No.
Yeah, I think Renee, you're better equipped as that's the
Yeah. No, that's not sent to the colleges, just the scores. So we don't have any idea when reviewing applications if there was accommodations.
Great. All right. This question we've already answered. All right. Are there tests like the Blue Book SAT practice test available for the new enhanced ACT?
Wow, that's why you've hit on one of my one of the things that I'm kind of a little agitated about the ACT is there's not an application like that, or a portal that where you can take like a full suite of practice tests. So I hope they're working on that, but the answer is that they don't have that the way the SAT does, where you have an app where you can go in and I think there's an individual kind of like separated subject part of ACT, but not what the questioner is thinking of as kind of like the Blue Book application. What there is the physical book, this for the new ACT, but of course that's not the portal or the digital kind of like testing site that the person just asked about. ACT does not have that yet.
Great. All right, let's go back to super scoring for a minute. How do you know if a particular college accepts super scores?
You have to check with each college individually. I will say the vast majority of schools in the country do super score, but there is definitely a fair number that do not. So most schools will put that right on their website, especially if they do not super score.
And Jennifer would like to know, if they do super score, do you have to request it or is it automatic?
It's automatic. So if they super score and you're sending multiple sets of scores, they will just go in and pull out those 2 strongest. So you don't need to request it.
All right, awesome. Can you advise on how to apply for accommodations if the student is a homeschooler and does not have a 504 at school because they don't go to school in person, but they want accommodations on the test?
Wow, such a good question because it usually starts with the guidance counselor. Do you, but with homeschool, you wouldn't have that kind of that individual or that point person. So
Well, both
have you ever
call.
run into that, Renee or Ann?
Yeah, I mean, the SAT and the ACT, both on their websites have information about submitting scores if you're a homeschooler or about accommodations and what to do if you're a homeschooler. So I would contact both of those organizations, and they both have customer service lines where you can talk to a real person and they will help you.
Great. And we have 2 minutes left and we have quite a few questions. Should we
Oh, we
keep
can take
going?
a few more.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
All
That's
right. How are test scores obtained? Are they available right away after a student takes their test?
Great question. If you have an account, if you set up an account and I can't imagine how you could do it without it, in order to register for the test, then on the both tests, you will get scores reported back to your account and an email notification within 10 to 14 business days of having taken the test. So some of the kind of like if you're getting a test booklet back or you're part of the ACT still does this 50% of the time where you can get your answers and the questions that you answered. That takes time, but the immediate feedback of getting like, oh, how did I do, which is what everybody wants to know, that you get back in 10 to 14 business days through your email and your account that you set up with ACT or SAT.
Great. And
They're
Pete,
pretty fast. I mean,
while we're talking, one parent is asking if you can provide a link to your favorite new ACT practice book in the chat
yes,
box.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we'll get that taken care of.
Great. All right. How common is it for students to submit both SAT and ACT scores to schools? Or is it better to only submit one, even if you take both?
No, you can definitely submit both, and many students will submit both sets of scores. So the colleges have the ability to go through and put both sets of scores in the review process and pull what would be the strongest for them. So you can super score between both of them, but if you do submit both, they will, admissions officers will see your superset for both sets of scores. But yes, absolutely, lots of students will submit both types.
And then on the flip side, Bert's asking if they take both, but only want to submit one, SAT or ACT, is that possible too?
Yeah, colleges don't know what you've taken until you've either self-reported it or sent the scores to them. So if you do take the ACT and you say, this wasn't really the one for me, and you switch to the SAT, you can just send your SAT scores in.
Great. All right. Pete, Angie is asking, can you set up the SAT account early, or does it have to be done during your junior year?
Oh, you
Online.
can set it up early. You can log on with a student account well before your junior year, and you can even go in and take PSAT and and other practice tests. There's a question bank too there's the SAT Educator question bank on the site, so that's not limited to the fact that you're registering for a test or that you're in test mode. You could do that at any time at SAT.org.
Great. And then Angie is also asking, can a student choose between the enhanced SAT or SAT? I think she might mean the new enhanced ACT versus the old version.
Okay, good question. In September, which we're just about there, in just a few days from now, the old ACT is retired. So it's going to go over to the new blueprint. The old test will not be an option. If you're taking the ACT, you will be under the new regime with the new time limits, the subjects, all of that. So the opportunity to take the old ACT is kind of faded away. That you would have had to have done that in June and July and the two or 3 months prior to this. So I think it's safe to say the old test is retired to the dugout.
All right. And Renee, Emily wants to know, do colleges think differently between tests that are taken in the fall of junior year versus the spring of junior year or senior year? So would they wonder why a student didn't take it during senior year? Would they wonder
No,
like, oh, did they score too low and now they're taking it again?
No, we do see, you would see the test dates when you're reviewing an application, but it's very common for students to take a set in the fall and then the spring. And so I'm working with many seniors who took the SATs last Saturday, and might take them again in September or October. So it does just, depend on the student's score. It also, and I think Ann Stewart spoke to this a little bit earlier, does depend on where you are in your math class. I just met with a junior last night who's just taking Algebra 2 right now. So, they may not take they're thinking about doing the December set to get used to the SAT format, doing some test prep, and then taking again in the spring. So the dates don't really matter that much, unless I see, wow, the student has a really low score. And then I look, oh, they hadn't finished Algebra 2 yet. So there is a little bit of like kind of digging into it that you can use for examples. I've seen students take the test once and say, I'm good, and I'm not taking it again. And then others that will
Right.
take it through their junior year and into their senior year. So it's very individual.
All right, and our last question about testing is from Jennifer. What is your advice about whether to self-report test scores or let the test automatically report if you've not tested yet?
Self-reflect, wait, say it again. Self-report test scores. I have an opinion on that, but what was the second part of the?
Self-report test scores or let the test automatically report if you've not tested yet, i.e.
So,
not sure how your score will be.
okay. So I do tell students to self-report scores. I'll start there because there are many colleges that will admit based off self-reported scores. So you don't then need to ask College Board to send official scores to every school. You may only need to send them to the school that you choose to enroll in. So as far as self-reporting, that would be my recommendation. Pete, do you have an opinion on the second part of it? I feel like I wouldn't send them unless I knew what the scores were. And I think that's
Yeah,
what she's asking.
I'm a very strong. I'm strong about individual control. I
Yeah.
feel like I want and I would want the family probably to kind of like adopt this idea that you want to control your application. So
Hmm.
to the extent that you can, because there are many different ways of looking at it. There are many schools, thousands out there, and they a different kind of like emphasis might be make sense in different with different schools. So that all kind of implies that you want to be driving the car as much as possible.
I think the tough thing to navigate here for families is every college does things so differently. Some take self-reported scores, some don't. Some colleges require that you send every single set of SATs or ACTs you've taken. Others let you just do your highest. So, I encourage families just to kind of start the college process a little bit early if you can, just so you have time to navigate some of those questions
Yeah,
once you have a
absolutely.
firm college list of where you'll be applying.
Absolutely. I feel like this is a mosaic of factors. And I was going to ask you, Renee,
Yes.
if I was going to could ask a question, is like how often it's interesting to me when they see like kind of like test optional. It's like, wow, it's like, well, how optional is it? Like 80% of the folks are submitting. It's like, is it fair to say that there's sometimes a difference between what their public statement is and then kind of like what they do? I mean, and I guess that's why we need people like you. It's like to for that. I mean, it seems to me that there is kind of a
Sure. I mean, it happens, and we
chasm.
touched based on it a little bit earlier, and some of it is really, it's not information that is always publicly easy to find. So as college counselors, we make sure we're always sharing information with each other. This is what I learned about this school. We all have different areas we specialize in. We know better. I would say, the schools that I worked for, I was at RIT for a very long time. They are truly test optional. If a student says they're not going to, like, just don't, like, there is no negative repercussions of that. But, I don't know that you would know that for every single school without really being on their admissions team. So, when I have questions, sometimes I just call the school up and ask them, and say, hey, this isn't a school that I work with, and that policy might change a little bit year to year as well. Things change every year based on applicant pools and the yields from the previous year. There's so many moving parts. But for me, I'm a data person. When someone asks me that question, I'm looking at scores, I'm looking at transcripts, I'm looking at how many submitted last year. Like I like concrete reasons behind why I'm making the decisions I am.
Yeah, have it be data driven. I saw somebody
Hmm.
was asking about the ACT book. We were trying to, um, and get that.
What is the,
Get
Pete,
that
it's
link.
just the red ACT book for 2025,
Yeah, that's right. It's
2026,
just
right? Yeah,
the official
it's-
ACT
there's
prep
only
guide.
one, so you can find that on Amazon.
That looks really well used, Pete.
It is. You know why? Look at this. It's already torn
Yeah.
apart because I was trying to create a mock test, so I was scanning pages. It's already
Oh,
been
okay.
abused.
All right, we have
Melissa,
3 questions. I think we're
you want to
in.
pick the one that maybe relate to everybody? Because I know we're already 10 minutes over.
Okay, sure. Let's see. All right, this
These are
is a
great
good one.
questions.
So as more and more kids are presumably sending test scores now that more schools are wanting to see them, is that going to bring the median scores down at these colleges?
Oh my gosh, that is such a good question. It's super insightful. And sometimes I tell that to families, I'm like, you have to take this middle 50% of scores with a grain of salt at these test optional schools. Because once they became test optional, that middle 50% of scores went way up from where they were before when everyone had to submit scores. So, the students with the strong scores are the students who are submitting scores. So yes, if, schools are leaning back more towards test score preferred, or you're seeing more students submit scores, I would expect there to be some shifts in that.
Great. All right, Anne, back to you.
Thank you, Melissa. Everybody, thank you so much for being here. Today is our last day of college week. I appreciate you so much for joining us. And tomorrow, we're going to send you an email with all 4 recordings from each day for you to have. Also, when you log off of this webinar, a survey will pop up, and we would be really grateful if you could comment on either today's webinar, all the webinars as a whole, if you came to more than one, and that will help guide us for the future. Thank you again, everybody. Pete, Renee, thank you for your expertise. I wish you all the very best for the remainder of this fall. Take care, everybody, and bye-bye.